Hey guys, Pete here, HVAC Greatness. Welcome. We're going to be talking about your pricing and how labor, specifically field labor, how it affects your pricing and your profits, and can you afford to hire that helper? If you're doing like I did, you hired him anyway, and you don't really understand how it all works, and so you're working extra hard trying to make it. I'm not laughing, man, but the memories, bro, the memories. Because when I had my business, I knew none of this stuff. I made every mistake you can, got all the scars, got the t-shirt, all that good stuff. But anyway, all right, so let's jump in here. I want to share this with you. This is a continuation of this particular program. We talked about overhead. We talked about costs of goods sold. We talked about payroll and how you need to, for your pricing at least, break certain labor out of the payroll, specifically field labor, what applies to a job. You got variable overhead and departmentalization, but we're going to talk about the payroll versus labor part, okay? So when you're figuring your prices, people who answer the phone, people who are part of the overhead, the office, they are part of the overhead department within your accounting, and also within your pricing. And those who work in the field, or those who are subcontractors, or those who are commissioned salespeople, they are part of COGS. And so we have to separate that in our pricing calculator. But let's talk about the labor for the overhead. So that would be, if you're an owner operator and you're the one that's in the field, what we kind of have to do is split up your time, and part of your time is going to be overhead and part of your time is going to be field. Now, how much? Well, that really depends on how much your draw is. So if you, let's say to pay the bills, you have to draw $5,000 a month. We see what your field contribution is and what you're doing in the field. And if you're contributing over $5,000 worth of direct labor to your jobs, then you just don't have to add anything for overhead. But if part of your time's in the field and part of your time's in the office, and you actually draw more than what you're producing, the rest of what you make is overhead. Let's talk about field labor, other cost of goods sold. So fundamentally, what we're looking at is your three departments. If you have full-time employees in each of these departments, you're going to price things one way. Like if you have full-time installers, and that's all they do, full-time service techs, that's all they do, and full-time maintenance techs, that one's a little easier to play with. Then we're going to price a certain way. But once we get into hybrid, we're going to do a little bit different. So I want to talk to you about that. And so let me escape out of here, and I'm going to jump over to our price calculators. And for those of you who have this will be a good refresher for you, so that you know how to really take care of your labor, because this is really important. So this is a little company I call AC and Heat Pete. So if you're going to call out AC and Heat Pete, and let's say I've got an installation. So these are all my numbers. I've got $156,000 worth of overhead, which, by the way, I calculate over here. Just on my overhead calculator, right? That's where that comes from. And so I kind of figure out which part goes to which department. I see what my capacity is. I set my goals, et cetera, and so forth. But I want to show you something. So let's say I've got my company going, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to hire me a helper. Okay. So let's see what that's going to look like. First of all, I want to go to my install, and I'm going to go in on this job that I'm going to call it Smith. I have $4,300 worth of stuff, equipment, pad, line set, whatever that is. So all that imports over here on your calculator, and then your sales tax, your truck expense. So this is a one-day job. The truck's parked there for a day, and I've got two man days, two men there one day, and I'm paying them task pay. I'm only paying them for that hour. We're going to get into this. This really gets interesting. So where does that number come from? All right, let me show you what that is. It's $373.80. I'm going to go all the way back over here, and I'm going to show you how we calculate that. So I've got a lead installer here that I pay $45 an hour, and I've got a helper that I pay $25 an hour. Or I'm pricing as if I have those employees and I'm the one that's doing that work, and I'm the one that's bringing that helper in, and they're not full-time. But we set this up based on an hourly rate. And then we're going to have to add things like your workers' compensation rate, any taxes that you have to match, vacation days, holiday, anytime you time off. And if you build this in, you're really going to be glad you did it, because you don't freak out when you have to send your helper home for the day and pay him for the day because it's not coming out of your profits. We built all this in because you got a little buffer built in there. That's the way we want to do this. But if we take those two and add them up, they're a team at $70 an hour. You never use this figure to calculate your pricing. And if that's what you're figuring, here's what you're missing. Remember those things up here? Workers' compensation, in this case, worked out to be about $5.39 per hour. I got to match my taxes, vacation days, holidays. I got a little inefficiency there, right? And so this is what I'm calling a burden. So I got a 33.5% burden. But the point is, if this is my cost per man day, $273.80. And since I have two guys there, it would be double this. So see that $273.80 right there? That's why that number is here. So it imports that. Okay, so I've got $747.60 for labor, but not just labor, their workers' comp and everything else. Because I'm a little tiny guy, this tool here that takes the lead tech and the helper and everything else, I would have to pay them $182,000 for the year. That's what it would cost me to employ them full time. And it's still going to cost me that to employ, let's just say my assistant here full time. It's going to cost me $65,000 for the year, but he's only billable 15% of the time. I only get 3 change outs a month. I'm a little guy. So he's what we're referring to as the hybrid. Remember when I was showing that right here? He's bouncing back and forth, and actually you're a hybrid as well. You're doing installs one day and you're doing service the other day. So how do we do that? Do we build all of that into the same department? Well, yeah, if we were a big company like this company over here, has got 4 installers and two-man teams, but they're 70% efficient. What we're going to do is we're going to take that $208,000, the lead man and the helper's annual salary, and we're going to divide that up by how many hours they're actually installing. And we project that, and we hold ourselves to that quota. And so that's roughly 175 one-day change-outs or 175 change-out days, right? Whether it's 2-man jobs or not. We build all that in. And so, 70% of the time, they're working. And so that's a realistic thing. And so now we're looking over here at a labor per crew day of right at $1,200. Okay, and it's burden. I've got that 25% I was talking about plus the 15% if I use the other way. But what it's going to do is it's going to take that and divide that into 1,400 hours, right? And that's 1,400, by the way, is 70% of the 2,000 hours that my guys are available to work. I gave them 80 hours off for off time, holidays, vacation, stuff like that. But there's still 2,000 hours. That's 50 weeks at 40 hours. Available, I'm paying them, but really I can't keep them that efficient. I wish I could make them 100% billable. So I'm saying 70% efficient. So I divide all of what they get paid into that amount of hours, and it gives me a man hour rate and a crew hour rate, as well as a crew day rate. I know I'm moving fast, but this is it's all in here and it does it for you. But here's what I want you to look at. Now check this out. Let's say that your helper, let me see here. What are my numbers? What is ACMP heat head? I'm only paying my guy $25 an hour. So I've got $65,000 I have to pay him, whether he's billable or he's handing me tools while I'm on a service call or running the truck for me. Right? He's not really billable. But if he's on a 2-man job, I can bill for him. We'll take those hours, and we're saying that's about 300 hours a year. So let's take his billable rate, and if you remember, let me go back over to our calculator here. We've got these guys kind of combined, so I'm going to go down here to my helper rate. Just a $25 an hour guy with all of his benefits, he's costing me about $33.25 an hour. That's what I have to pay, and I'm only doing that for 300 hours. right? Because he can only help me on, I'm calling about an average of 3 systems per month. There's 36, and I pick up an extra system per month during the peak season. So let me just make that 38. So 38 times 8 hours would be 300 production hours, 304. So cool. Let's take 304 and pay him that, what was that number again? $33.25. So this is what he's actually earned times $33.25. Okay. Now, he has actually been billable out of the funds that he's generated. I can pay $10,108 of his salary. Now, follow me here. Here's the problem. He's generated this much money for me here, but I got to pay him this much money right here, $65,000. If I'm paying out $65,000 on the year, and he's generating $10,000, where does that other $55,000 come from? Well, it comes out of your net profit, unless you account for him. Now, let me show you a little trick here. So I'm going to call this $55,000. Right now, I've got a person in the office that helps me out. Okay, I've only got $156,000 worth of overhead. But if we look at let's look at what my pricing is. So I'm going to go back to this change out. I got $4,300. And I'm selling that job for $95.54 because I want to make a 20% net profit. See that? 20%? Okay. And the financing fee, I just got the credit card amount up here at 3.5%. So the credit card is going to get their bite. That leaves me this much money. This is my gross profit here, but this is my net profit. I wanted 20% for that change out. Okay. That's fair. Now let's compare real quick. I've got a capacitor. On a repair, I need $418 for that 1 hour repair. It doesn't matter what it is. It's anything that's right there close to that 45 minutes to an hour total repair time. Okay. I'm shooting for 20% on that under this example. All right. So I need $418 minus the credit card fees. I make $403, net profit of $81. Okay. Because your break even up here is going to take into account, the sales tax on the part, a little bit of contingency, your truck expense, the 1 hour's labor cost. I'm paying this full-time hourly. That's why this is a little high. I'll explain that later. But my point is I need $418 out of that repair to get me my 20%. So let's say I don't change any of my pricing, but I take and I recoup my $55,000. So if I've got over here in my overhead, this person in the office, I'm going to put it down here in miscellaneous. I've got $5,000 down here in miscellaneous. I'm going to add that $55,000 to that. So now my overhead is going to be $60,000 more. Now my overhead is $211,142. If I come over to my calculator and I change my overhead to $211,142, okay, all my pricing just adjusted. Now, because I had those two prices I gave you an example of manually entered, that price is not going to change, but my net profit is going to go down. And it's calculating all my projected jobs that when I set this thing up. Okay, so here we go. Am I still making 20% on that change out? Well, I go over here and whoa, I'm still charging the same price. I'm only making 14.13%. This is what it costs me in order to carry this helper. Now he's billable 300 hours a year, but what about the other 2,000? I'm paying him, and so I got to build that into some place. Let's look at that capacitor, $15 capacitor, or anything of that sense. I went from 20% down to 11. So this is what it will do to your profit. So let's do this a little differently. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to hit the undo button. And I'm going to undo that. So we're back where we were. And so this time I'm going to price that install instead of doing a manual selling price, I'm going to say, give me a net profit of 20%. Okay. So now I'm still at the same price because that's what we were looking for to begin with. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on my repair. Instead of it manually putting that price, I'm going to let it calculate it for me based on 20%. So still, again, 417 on that repair, and then 95, 52 on that install. And I'm gonna change that number again. I'm adding this guy's into my overhead, 211, 142. Let's go back over here and see how it's going to affect my price. Now, see here, right now it's $9,500 and $9,552. All right, here we go. 211, 142. It was 9,550. Well, guess what it is now? If I'm going to make 20%, I have to raise my price up to $10,255 to help account for carrying that helper, even if he is billable on this job. He's not billable the rest of the week. Let's see what that did to my $417 capacitor repair. Now it's $465, but I can still make my 20%. So by adding this in, this is how you actually understand how it's going to impact your pricing, which is the cost of the helper. I was laughing so hard when I stuck this picture in there. You good helpers out there, please forgive me. This doesn't apply to all of y'all. But yeah, so all that non-billable time, it's got to go somewhere. If you don't put it somewhere, it comes out of your net profit. And if your net profit is too low, it will make you negative net profit, which means you're losing money and you can't pay your bills and you don't understand why. Okay, so that's how we would apply this to trainees. On the hybrid, we can bounce our guys back and forth. What we can use is the same calculation technique to do this. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to undo this, and I'm going to go back here and I'm going to undo that and keep that like it was. So when you are talking about the owner's labor, this is a little calculator that I do. If my owner is doing 29 service calls a month and working on 3 change outs, maybe makes a couple of accessory sales, and I'm going to move over here, and he's $45 an hour. He's billing $26.10 that I can apply towards payroll because that's field labor. I'd have to pay somebody else. $1,000 on my change out, $90 on this. I've got $450 on the hourly rate because let's say I do commercial work for 10 hours. The point is, I've got $4,230, but I draw $5,000. Uh-oh. That means I need to take, if I'm paying for myself for $4,230, but I need another $770 to make ends meet, then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put $770 as part of the owner operator, so that it builds an extra $9,240 into the overhead so that I can pay myself the salary I've got to have. And as you come less out of the field, or you come out of the field and that goes down, then you adjust this. You just kind of stay on top of that until you're full time and you're larger and you're just overhead at that point. You know, unless you want to go out there and work a little bit, which you always want to do a little bit and work with your team. But this is kind of an overview of what that would look like. All this is in the price calculator. This is the installation department. Again, this is just a little one-man operation with a helper. Okay, and over here I've got just one tech because I can't bill for that junior technician here, right? So I only bill for the lead technician. But if I'm 45% efficient, that's pretty darn good. 45 to 50, that's pretty good. That means I'm billable 900 hours. If you're billable 50% on a 2,000, on a 40-hour week, that means billable hours, you're billable 20 hours a week, every week of the month on average. The whole year, 20 hours, okay? And so there'll be days when you're out there working 60 hours, but how many, when you're using flat rate, is the direct billable amount? Now, I did put an override in here. So in this case, let's say, for example, we've got, we're trying to figure out the pay. And I realized that if I were a full-time company, now this is the big company, I'm over here now, their hourly rate's going to be about $1,200. and they're going to have to figure that into their pricing. But when I go to look at mine, because the calculator is going to try to pay the whole annual salary and cram it into 38 changeouts. So that's like almost $5,000 worth of labor for a changeout. So we can't use that particular option. So what I do is when I'm over my calculator, instead of paying by the hour, see how crazy that would be, how expensive my job would have to be. This is a hybrid situation. Three change outs a month, and there's 22 working days. And that's 3 days I'm doing change outs. That makes sense. And so that's why we override that with the task pay. Now, what the task pay is actually going to do, it's only going to pay for the hours that they're working at a burdened rate, right? It's got your vacation and your workers' comp, all that stuff on top of there. So it does recoup that, but it doesn't recoup your downtime. But if you were to come in and let's say you wanted basically to base it on what if you were full-time, how much labor should you genuinely be charging instead of just paying for that 1 hour and not considering all that downtime, because we're going to have to make that labor up somewhere else just like we did on our helper. We'll make it up on service, but you see what I'm saying? So what we have to do is come in and we do an override on this task pay. So watch this. I'm going to come back to my master price book, and it's already pulling from this number down here for my installers just on their hourly rate plus their burden. Over here, what I can do is this, instead of letting it automatically pull there, I'm going to go in and manually override it. I'm going to put 1111 in there. It's going to mark that up for my benefits, right? My burden. And now I'm at 1388. Well, how about that? 1388, and the bigger companies maybe 1188. That may be a little bit more in line where I need to be. And I don't know if that bigger company is a good example because those numbers haven't been gone through, so don't use that as a reference. But all of a sudden, look here. All of a sudden, I'm charging a lot more for my labor, and I'm building that in, and I really need to have this price if I'm making 20%. And the reason you might do that is to go ahead and account for your downtime, that it's not over in the service department. It's actually in between doing other stuff. But the point is this. Let me show you this. Whether this lead installer, AC and heat beat, whether this is me making $117,000 based on my $45 an hour in my install department, or whether I'm doing it down here in my service department, I need to make sure that the monies that I'm charging for my time between those two departments totals $117,000. If not, back it on overhead, right? If you're going to guarantee 40 hours for your team. And these days, it's so hard to get good people. You need to do that. Keep your overhead down, but don't go cheap. You got to do things like this advertising budget right here of $60,000. That's no accident. We go through every month, one at a time, and see how much money we're going to have to spend to advertise that month to hit our quota. And it looks like by the time we go through the whole year, in this case, we've got 143 opportunities that we paid for, either through a service call or an estimate. And if they cost us $300 a head, that's $42,900 plus my SEO. I got to come up with $60,900 right here. 60900. That was supposed to auto import for some reason. It's not doing it. Anyway, so that would be my adjusted overhead on that. So labor, critical, very important. You need that training. You're going to have to train them. So you take that burden and it becomes overhead to the company, or if you're departmentalized, to that department, part of its overhead, right? And you work it into your pricing. You can take a hit on the net profit and stay at that price point if you want to, but why not go ahead and build all your pricing in and allow the calculator to tell you what it needs to charge to make that 20%. And if either your departments are out of whack, let's say you're really too high on service and you're too low on installs, you could actually take your overhead and move it over, right? Part of that, not all of it, but part over it to get that back in line with what the rest of the market is charging so that you don't look like you're out of whack. But the big secret, obviously, is to understand these numbers well enough. And I know this is a lot, especially if this is the first time you're hearing this. But it's not that hard once we go through it a few times. It's just you're moving the money around. You just got to make sure it adds up, right? And we're not missing anything. We just move it around. Account for everything, build it all in there, move it around, let the calculator tell you what the price is, and that's what you charge. And if you can't sell that, then you got a problem. And that is going to be a problem for a lot of people because they're worth this, it costs this, but they can't sell this, so they start losing jobs. And so this is where it's really important to know what customer you're going after and to market to them and brand yourself in a way that they will pay more money for you. As long as you're just another heating and air company, why should they? If somebody who doesn't know their numbers and they're undercharging or doesn't care is going to do that job, they do heating and air, you do heating and air, they've got a license, you got a license, they have insurance, you have insurance, maybe. Why should they buy from you? So getting your numbers established is only part of it. Getting your brand identity and unique marketing position and your power secret weapon, whatever that is, what you're known for above and beyond heating and air. Oh yeah, you get heating and air anywhere, but you can only get this from you. That is what we're talking about. And that's what you're going to want to build all this stuff on. It all goes together. Okay. We got to control all this stuff. But if we can keep it relatively simple, like what I was showing you here on this, on this calculator, you can keep control of all this because you got enough balls in the air as it is, don't you? Right? You're trying to figure all this stuff, plus do the marketing, plus do the hiring, plus do estimates and the service calls, the callbacks, going behind the helper. Anyway, I love helper jokes. My first one was 19 years old. Oh gosh. You know, he died. This is crazy. He died the same day my mom died last year. I got a call through family and everything else. He was 50 years old, 50. I hired him when he was 19. And he was a true friend. He really was a good guy. Of course, we had our fights. Usually me yelling at him for doing stupid stuff. Like, you know, when you're in there and you're doing this and you say, hey, here, take the screwdriver and do that. And you're doing this and a hand hands you the screwdriver back. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and take that screwdriver and put it right there where it goes. Or you could do it. I don't know. That's the way it felt anyway. But bless his heart, he didn't know. And he actually learned a good bit. I had a food line grocery store. I used to do commercial refrigeration. And my grandmother had died, and I'd flown out to Texas to go through all that. So I had a buddy of mine who owned his company to kind of watch my calls. And the grocery store called, and they had were hosing down the vegetation section. What do you call the produce section? And they hit, you know, the little door switch when you come in and out of the cooler door. Well, there was a switch in there, and it would take the evaporator fans offline so that, you know, it's not blowing while the door's open. They had hosed that down, shorted it out, and I think it tripped a fuse way back in the mechanical room. And anyway, this little 19-year-old helper, he was out there with me. You know, maybe he was 20 by then. He went along with my buddy who owned his own company, who didn't really do much refrigeration. He did mostly air conditioning, and the helper's like, well, I don't know. Pete always goes in here. I don't know. Pete does it. And he traced that rascal back and figured it out. And my buddy says, man, this kid's going to be good, you know. But unfortunately, I fired him so many times. The last time he wouldn't come back. I used to get mad, just fire him. But you know, I was a young business owner. I was pretty immature. So I think he was 19, so I was 29. And, you know, you make a lot of mistakes when you're young. But anyway, I hope this helps out. Labor is really important. You're going to have to build it into the company expenses. It is what it is. The big companies do it. This is why they're so much more expensive. That and some of them are pretty greedy. Some of them just overcharge. But anyway, but legitimate companies that are large, they have to charge more because they build all that stuff in there. And you're legitimate too. Build that stuff in there so that you're pricing right, and then build a brand. And I'm talking holistic. I'm talking everything. When a brand is the way people perceive you, that you got to understand, it's not a logo. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about building an identity and reverse engineering it so that people see you the way you designed your branding to be perceived. Something better, something specialized, more expensive, but for good reason. And so that starts from the first time they see your van going down the road, your website, your online presence, all the way through the customer experience, the customer journey. And, there is no customer experience to delight and convert them if there is no customer impression to get that call. It all starts with the impression. That's really important stuff I'm sharing right now. And if you don't have that right, go to RamseyMediaLLC.com and look at some of the branding that we've done. Strategize branding. And listen to those testimonies. Just click on the little van there. They'll tell you. It really pays when it's done right. Nobody does this right. The big branding outfits out there, they're doing all the wraps for $40,000, $50,000 just to take what you've got and make it beautiful. And it is beautiful, and you love it because that's your baby. But is it making the phone ring? Was it reverse engineered with that customer in mind? Who knows how to do that better than heating and air companies that go into the data professionally, extract the information. It'll resonate. You'll know this is right because you talk to these customers every day. We do customer review auditing and all that stuff. We do this right, okay? And by the time you get your identity figured out and you manifest that into a visual and you start, it infiltrates throughout your company and your maintenance programs. All this stuff is just part of a higher caliber of what your customers are used to, right? And I know you probably do good work. I know, I get it. But they don't know you. They can't look at that work and tell if it's good or not. They judge you by the way you look. How professional you look, how professional you talk, how that uniform hangs on your body. Or lack of uniform, shorts, plumber's cleavage, shirt tails hanging out, dirty, odors, bad haircut, right? All that works against you. And your family and your friends may know you and love you and accept that. Customers, they don't have that benefit. So they don't know you and love you yet. So create something knowable and lovable. Pete Ramsey here, HVAC Greatness. Hope some of this stuff makes sense. I will see you on the next one. Take care.